Goodbye, England's road.
When the famous or powerful or celebrated die, little in their lives can match the leaving of them.
And I just wanted to say I love him.
The world quiets down. Millions grieve.
Goodbye, England's road.
Those left behind build imposing memorials to remember them or to hold their remains. Few, of course, will be honored with days of mourning, and splendid tombs like this are reserved for kings and presidents. President Ulysses Grant in this case. But for those who have left a mark on the times they lived in, their passing will be marked, if at all, here, on the obituary page of a newspaper.
Obits only have one line that deals with death. The rest of the story is about the amazing lives that people lead.
Once upon a time, the obituary was traditional as typewriters and switchboard operators and newsrooms heavy with tobacco smoke. They were formal, polite, and the standard for inclusion was rigid.
In the old days, people were often obituarized, if that's the word, just for being upstanding members of society.
Bill McDonald has edited the New York Times obituary section for more than 4 years.
If you belong to the right clubs and went to the right schools, they still may get obituaries in the Times, but it's not an automatic call now, where it might have been 20, 40 years ago.
But in the early 1980s, a Philadelphia Daily News writer named Jim Nicholson moved to the obituary beat and began to breathe new life into this very old form.
We were the people paper, still is the people paper, and it just seemed natural to do row house people, mechanics, plumbers, teachers, cops.
People like a chef who was a hard worker and an easy touch, a bartender who could make a setting click, whether it was a tavern, girls' club, or home.
I wrote the obituaries for the Daily News.
And it's made Nicholson a hero to those who followed in his path and who gathered earlier this year in Philadelphia.
It's well-deserved, and congratulations.
Well, thank you. We couldn't have done it without you.
Writers like Kay Powell, who spent 16 years writing obits for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
I feel every person has one good story in them, and this is my chance to be on the phone talking to family and friends, capturing that person.
And Powell found that humor and an offbeat lead can work just as well in an obit as in any other story.
Well, I'll give you the lead on one of my stories I wrote. George Hopkins died again Friday.
Turns out George almost drowned during World War II and was brought back to life. Powell also loved her idea for an auctioneer's obit.
And I resisted using the lead going, gone.
Of course, there's a whole new universe of media that surrounds us now.
We are all called to a better country.
And it's given the obituary a whole new dimension.
People of all ages have their own blogs and journals. They have their own Facebook pages. There's no reason why we can't link to those.
Jade Walker, who runs a website aptly called The Blog of Death, says the web offers limitless ways to remember.
Oftentimes when we're doing research for obits, we search places like YouTube, or if I'm dealing with a musician, I'll link directly to their page where they have music clips.
The New York Times has met the challenge of new media as well.
I bought Buckwald and I just died.
Video interviews in contemplation of the inevitable. Buckwald, suffering from diabetes, spoke about his life 6 months before his death.
I was put on earth to make people laugh. And if you can make people laugh, you get all the love you want.
But there was no laughter, no contemplation of death 9 years ago when the Times faced its biggest challenge in memorializing the dead, when nearly 3,000 people died in an instant. On the front page, headlines and photos could signify the enormity of the event. But how to deal with a few thousand dead, most of whom were known only to friends, family, and colleagues?
We quickly realized that the traditional obituary structure, where you introduce someone's great achievements in the first paragraph, tell their life as a sort of narrative chronologically, and then end by saying their relatives, wouldn't work for 2,400 people. So we set up this idea of focusing each one on one trait of that person's life.
Wendell Jameson edited Portraits of Grief, short capsules of more than 2,000 lives that ran every day for 3.5 months It was awarded a Pulitzer Prize.
The singular quality that really stays with me is almost no one ever talked about that person's job.
Jan Hoffman wrote more than 75 of them.
It was about love, it was about singularity, it was about connection, it was about moments of thoughtfulness.
And she found the stories that lay beneath the surface. For instance, the apparently happy-go-lucky young man.
Right before the memorial service, an oncologist came to the family and said, "I'd like to speak at his memorial." And the family said, "What are you talking about?" And the oncologist said, "Didn't you know he had cancer?" And what he did was he put makeup on his face so his family wouldn't realize that he was going through chemotherapy.
For those who chronicle death on a daily basis, the writing about the end of life has left them with very clear lessons about their own.
I recognize that it's going to happen. I'm not afraid of it. But knowing that it's coming, I have to make the most of what we have.
A question I ask myself is, what would mine say? How would you capture your life in 205 words?